I sat at the kitchen table, coffee long gone cold, the morning sunlight falling across my hands, still gripping the mug I hadn't touched. Tyler's keys clinked against the counter as he entered, casual, unbothered, as if nothing had happened. "You're overreacting," he said, voice drifting from the hallway, detached and rehearsed. Overreacting. He'd spent my birthday night at Megan's place, his ex, while I stayed awake, wondering if I'd imagined everything, questioning my own instincts. The audacity of his calm, the normalcy he projected, was worse than any argument. I looked down at the ring on my finger, that delicate gold band I'd once loved, and quietly slid it off, placing it on the table with a soft click. He noticed it from the doorway, confusion flashing across his face. I didn't speak. I walked past him, every step measured, silent, but speaking volumes. "Before I share everything, I need you to understand why I stayed silent all those years. Have you ever given so much, only to feel invisible? I'm Riley, and this isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about noticing the cracks, the patterns, and finding the strength to reclaim what's yours. Sit with me for a few minutes. Watch closely. Because sometimes the quietest decisions speak the loudest, and the smallest actions change everything." I had built my life around trust. In our 3 years of marriage, I had been the steady one, always there, always patient, always believing Tyler would show up for me the way I showed up for him. Mornings started with coffee I brewed just the way he liked, nights ended with quiet reassurances while ignoring the little red flags that piled up like dust in corners. I gave, I adjusted, I compromised, not because I was weak, but because I believed love was about effort, and effort meant seeing the other first. Everyone around us assumed our marriage was perfect. Friends complimented me on how understanding I was. His family praised my kindness. But inside, I felt small moments of unease. Invitations to social events always came with "just bring yourself" from him, leaving me to manage the rest alone. Trips we planned somehow always became his schedule, his convenience, his world. I noticed these patterns, but I convinced myself it was normal compromise. I didn't ask for much, just honesty, respect, acknowledgement. Instead, I became the quiet laborer of our home and heart, silently holding pieces together no one even saw were fraying. Every smile I wore, every word I didn't speak, was a calculation. If I lost my calm, if I reacted, it could unravel everything. And yet, deep down, I knew that balance was fragile. One night, one discovery, one simple act of walking away would be enough to tip it all, and I was ready. The first hints of his disregard were subtle, easy to dismiss, like ripples on water that you barely notice until they collide with something solid. Tyler's phone would buzz during dinner, and he'd excuse himself with a casual shrug. A text he hid, a call he took in the hallway, little things that didn't add up, but I noticed. Friends laughed off my concerns, calling me paranoid, saying, "He's just busy." But I couldn't shake the feeling that the busy pattern was deliberate. Even at home, there were small indignities. He'd forget plans I had carefully arranged, dismiss my questions with half-smiles, and speak to me in tones meant to soften guilt rather than admit wrongdoing. I started cataloging moments in my head, silent timestamps of behavior no one else saw. Each incident was a whisper of a truth I wasn't ready to name aloud. By the time his ex appeared on my radar again, I wasn't surprised, only wary. I noticed the slight tension in his posture when her name came up, the way he shielded his phone, the casual lies that felt rehearsed. It wasn't a single betrayal yet, it was a pattern, and patterns, I had learned, never lie. I stayed composed. I smiled when necessary, nodded when required, and recorded everything in my mind like a quiet ledger. No one else needed to see it, but I would remember. One day, the pieces would tell a story louder than my voice ever could, and the moment would be mine to choose. Tyler's arrogance grew like unchecked ivy. Each slight I once overlooked became bolder, more public. At a brunch with friends, he laughed at a story I carefully curated, dismissing my words with a wave. The room chuckled with him, and I smiled politely, letting it slide. Inside, a spark of clarity ignited. I was no longer invisible. I was being measured, underestimated. At home, the contrast was sharper. Behind closed doors, he apologized half-heartedly, a rehearsed charm that tried to erase his public antics. "I didn't mean it like that," he'd say, but I could see through the performance. The dismissals weren't mistakes, they were rehearsed signals of dominance. Every casual insult, every undermined opinion, every ignored contribution was a breadcrumb leading to a bigger revelation. I began to see the pattern in slow motion. My pain, my frustration, my very presence became collateral in his private theater of control. The more he showed confidence in front of others, the smaller he appeared to me, not in stature, but in moral authority. He thought visibility equaled power, but he had underestimated my quiet patience. In these moments, I did nothing. I observed. I catalogued. I made mental notes of each word, each gesture, each lie told in passing. No confrontation, no yelling, no emotional outburst. Only silence, the most underestimated weapon in a battle of perception. He thrived on reactions, I would give him none. This phase of dismissal was necessary, it set the stage for awareness. While he strutted under the glow of imagined control, I collected evidence of his arrogance, his carelessness, his betrayals. The more he overreached, the closer he edged toward his own undoing, unaware that I was quietly arming myself with every detail he left behind. Even as Tyler flaunted confidence publicly, a quiet isolation crept over me. Friends whispered when he made subtle jabs, family smiled politely, unaware of the layers beneath. I questioned myself at first, was I overreacting? Was I imagining slights? The gaslighting was insidious, a constant background hum. Every time I tried to share my discomfort, he skillfully twisted it. You're too sensitive, he'd say. Exhaustion settled deep in my bones. I woke to a heaviness, the kind that makes mornings blur into nights. Every conversation with him drained me, every text carried a hidden barb. But even in that haze, I held on to a flicker of awareness. My dignity wasn't gone, it had retreated, observing silently. I began to see the patterns more clearly. The late-night calls, the unexplained absences, the little lies stitched into his stories, they weren't mistakes. They were threads in a tapestry of control, each designed to make me doubt my instincts. And yet, with every manipulative act, he left traces, proof waiting for careful eyes. Isolation didn't break me, it sharpened me. Alone in my apartment, I started documenting. Notes, screenshots, timelines. Every small indignity recorded without emotion, catalogued for the moment it would matter most. My power didn't lie in confrontation, it lay in endurance, in the patience to wait while the world underestimated me. Even as self-doubt whispered its siren song, I refused to respond impulsively. The narrative wasn't mine to explain yet. I let him act, let him misstep, let his arrogance guide him into exposure. Each unnoticed slight became ammunition. Each sleepless night became preparation. I was silent, but not powerless. The illusion of defeat hit me quietly but sharply. Tyler's public demeanor remained untouchable, his charm convincing to those around us. Friends and colleagues nodded at his explanations, casting me as the overly sensitive, unreasonable wife. Even my own confidence wavered, for a moment, the weight of everyone believing him heavier than the truth I held. At work, subtle jabs arrived through whispered conversations and pointed remarks. At family gatherings, he smiled confidently while I stayed muted, measured. Every missed birthday, every casual excuse, seemed to reinforce that he had control. The narrative was his to shape, at least on the surface. But beneath that polished exterior, cracks began to appear. The small lies, the inconsistencies, the carefully hidden details of his actions, they didn't vanish. I noticed them, quietly, cataloging each instance. Where the world saw harmony, I saw gaps. Where they saw innocence, I saw pattern. I wasn't naive, though the audience might think I was. I endured the slights, the whispers, the subtle undermining, without collapse. My endurance wasn't resignation, it was preparation. Each false victory he claimed became evidence for a greater reversal, each smile he wore a mask hiding the truth that would one day be unveiled. Even as doubt threatened to seep in, I reminded myself, this is temporary. The apparent loss, the misjudgment, the public perception, all of it was a stage, and I was observing. Every slight, every deception, was a building block for leverage I would eventually reveal. I walked through the days in measured silence, letting him bask in unearned confidence. Every eye that doubted me, every voice that questioned me, was noted and stored. The story wasn't finished. I hadn't faltered. I hadn't lost. I was waiting. And in waiting, I grew stronger. I learned to move through the days almost invisibly, keeping my head down while Tyler flaunted his carefully constructed image. Every smile he gave, every word he spoke to friends or family, only highlighted the contrast between his facade and the reality I held silently in my hands. I kept observing, noting patterns, storing evidence in plain sight without ever confronting him. Every late-night text, every whispered excuse, every manipulated perception, it all became part of the timeline I was building. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't give anyone a hint of my inner resolve. Silence became my ally, patience my weapon. At home, I maintained the routine expected of me. I cooked, I cleaned, I laughed when necessary, but the spark inside me burned quietly, unyielding. He thought I was unaware, the audience knew better. My power wasn't in confrontation, it was in restraint, in watching him overextend, in letting the truth accumulate unnoticed. Every small slight became a detail in a bigger picture. The way he dismissed me publicly, the way friends defended him blindly, the tiny manipulations, they were all recorded, all noted. While he enjoyed temporary triumph, I was steady, unmoved, calculating. I wasn't broken. I was enduring. And endurance, I knew, had its own strength. It was the calm before the storm, the pause before the reveal. Every moment of quiet observation added weight to the day of reckoning. I had become untouchable, not through confrontation, but through patient vigilance. As the days passed, the patterns became undeniable. Tyler's lies weren't random, they repeated with precision. Anniversaries he claimed were spent alone, business trips that conveniently aligned with Megan, messages hidden behind innocuous labels. Every story, every excuse, lined up perfectly with evidence I had been silently collecting. It wasn't anger that fueled me, it was clarity. The confusion that had clouded my judgment for years dissolved, replaced by awareness. I could see the web he had spun, and for the first time, I understood the scale of his deception. Every "I'm busy" text, every forced smile at family gatherings, every instance of belittlement, it wasn't isolated. It was a methodical pattern designed to keep me compliant and blind. I reviewed the timeline repeatedly, connecting dates with transfers, nights out, and suspicious absences. What others might have dismissed as coincidence became a map of manipulation. My emotional labor, my patience, my forgiveness, all exploited. And yet, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't breaking. I was seeing. This recognition shifted something inside me. The humiliation, the confusion, the self-doubt, they became fuel for strategy. Every subtle slight was now a piece of evidence. Every manipulation a lesson. I realized that endurance wasn't enough, I needed leverage. The leverage was there, hidden in plain sight, and I was finally ready to wield it. The audience, privy to my discoveries, began to feel the tension rising. Tyler thought he controlled the narrative, but every act of deception was now a thread I could pull. My silent observation had transformed into active awareness. Every day I endured, I learned. Every slight he committed, I recorded. Every lie, I catalogued. And with that understanding came the calm confidence I had been cultivating, an internal shift from victimhood to control. I was no longer reacting. I was preparing, and the storm he didn't see coming was built on patience, precision, and the quiet certainty that justice would be mine. While Tyler strutted through his daily life, oblivious to the scrutiny he was under, I quietly gathered my hidden advantage. Every suspicious message, every unexplained expense, every whispered excuse he'd given over the years, meticulously documented. Screenshots, emails, bank statements, hotel receipts, travel logs, all forming an irrefutable timeline. No one else saw it yet. Not his friends, not his family, not even Megan. This advantage existed solely for me and the audience, a secret weapon built on years of patience. Every moment of endurance, every slight I had ignored, now became a building block for undeniable truth. I cross-referenced his stories with the evidence. Dates that didn't match, promises unkept, celebrations he had sabotaged, everything aligned to show his pattern of deceit. His arrogance was my ally, because he believed I would remain silent, he overextended himself repeatedly. The audience, seeing the collected evidence unfold, could feel the tension escalating. They were aware of the leverage I held while Tyler remained blissfully ignorant. Every smile he offered, every casual text he sent, became more precarious as the audience understood that his empire of lies was about to crumble. And then came the final piece, witnesses. Friends who had unknowingly observed his behavior, colleagues who had noted inconsistencies, even Megan herself, unwittingly providing confirmation of his actions. All of this, quietly documented, would tip the scales. This was not about revenge yet. It was about control, about transforming the emotional weight of betrayal into a tangible, strategic advantage. I didn't need confrontation, I needed proof. Proof that would speak louder than any argument, louder than any tear, louder than his own rehearsed apologies. And so, while Tyler continued to act as if everything was normal, the audience knew something he did not. His downfall had already been quietly written. Every act of deceit, every lie, every manipulation had been logged, organized, and readied. The moment for revelation was approaching, and it would be absolute, shocking, and irreversible. The calm before the storm, carefully curated, ensured that when the time came, the impact would be spectacular. And Tyler, still blinded by his arrogance, would finally see the consequence of underestimating the woman he thought he controlled. As the evidence mounted and the patterns became undeniable, something shifted inside me. The desperation, the hurt, the endless attempts to seek his approval, they all began to dissolve. I realized that I no longer needed his validation, no longer needed his words to define my worth. The quiet confidence I had buried beneath years of compromise started to emerge. Each documented lie, each manipulation, became proof not of my weakness, but of my resilience. I had survived his betrayals, endured the emotional weight of his actions, and now held the power to control the narrative. I stopped replaying the past in my mind, stopped wondering if I could have done things differently. Instead, I focused on the facts, the proof, and the steps ahead. My anger transformed into clarity, my hurt into precision. This was no longer about emotional retaliation, it was about strategic empowerment. The audience could see it too. The woman who had once been silenced, who had walked past him quietly, was no longer the same. She was composed, deliberate, and untouchable. Every decision I would make from this point forward would be informed by reason and evidence, not by fleeting emotion. And with that calm determination, I began planning my next moves. Each email drafted, each record compiled, each timeline double-checked, it all served a single purpose, to ensure that when the moment came, justice would not only be done, it would be undeniable. No more doubts, no more apologies. I was no longer reacting, I was orchestrating. The transformation was complete, inner peace blended with unstoppable resolve. The woman who had quietly endured was now a force that could not be ignored, manipulated, or dismissed. The stage was set. Tyler's arrogance would soon meet the full weight of truth, and the audience would witness a reversal that was inevitable, satisfying, and fully earned. With my newfound clarity, I began moving deliberately. There was no rush, no impulsive confrontation, everything had to be airtight. Each piece of evidence was catalogued: hotel receipts, message screenshots, credit card transactions, calendar entries. Every lie he had told, every time he had prioritized her over me, was now documented with precision. I created a timeline that exposed the pattern of his deceit: anniversaries, birthdays, business trips that weren't business trips, nights he claimed were late shifts. Each entry was cross-referenced with messages, locations, and witnesses. I ensured that nothing could be denied or explained away. I also anticipated his moves. I knew he would try to gaslight, to twist the story, to cast me as the unstable one. So, I prepared countermeasures: emails to his friends and family, screenshots ready for legal submission, a clear narrative for my attorney. I didn't need to shout or dramatize, the facts themselves were my weapon. Emotionally, I steeled myself. I reminded myself that patience was part of the strategy. I would not give him the satisfaction of an emotional reaction. Each interaction would be calm, measured, and focused on the evidence. The audience could feel my composure. The tension wasn't in shouting, it was in the inevitability of what was coming. I also secured allies discreetly. My mother, my closest friends, and my attorney all understood the full scope. They didn't need persuasion, they only needed to witness the facts. When the moment came, the world would see the truth, and his carefully constructed image would crumble. Finally, I rehearsed my own mental presence. In every confrontation, I would remain composed. My silence would speak volumes. My confidence, quiet but unshakable, would contrast sharply with his unraveling. The stage was ready, the pieces were set. This wasn't revenge in the dramatic sense, it was justice executed with precision. Every detail, every document, every calculated step ensured that when I finally revealed the truth, it would be undeniable, irreversible, and satisfying in the purest sense. The woman who had endured quietly was now the architect of her own power. The countdown to public revelation had begun. The day came when I returned to the space where it had all begun, our apartment, the home I had shared with him. The familiar walls now felt charged with tension, as if they themselves were waiting for the reckoning. I walked in calmly, carrying nothing but the quiet certainty I had spent weeks building. He noticed immediately. The confident smirk that had always masked his deceit faltered. My presence alone, steady and unflinching, shifted the room's energy. He tried to make small talk, casual remarks to test my composure, but I ignored them. Each word he spoke bounced harmlessly off the armor of preparation I had constructed around myself. I placed the documents I had meticulously organized onto the kitchen counter. The receipts, screenshots, and timelines were now visible, undeniable. There was no dramatic flourish, no yelling, no tears, no overacting. Just facts arranged like soldiers ready for inspection. Friends and family who had witnessed his casual arrogance began to arrive, as planned. They didn't know all the details yet, only that something was about to shift. I didn't need to explain or persuade, the evidence spoke for itself. Every glance he cast around the room betrayed rising panic, a subtle dance between disbelief and fear. I moved deliberately, walking through the space with quiet authority. Each step reinforced my control. He was used to dictating narratives, controlling perception, masking his actions behind charm and excuses. Now, every space he had relied on for comfort and dominance had become the stage for his exposure. By the time the first witnesses processed the documents, it was clear, the power had shifted. I was no longer the one shrinking to accommodate his lies. I had returned to the arena, not for confrontation, but for inevitable justice. And the room, our home, once his stage, now reflected my dominance, my preparation, my unshakable calm. His arrogance, once subtle, now erupted in visible panic. Tyler tried to speak over me, to charm, to manipulate, to minimize. "This isn't how it seems," he insisted, voice rising, hands gesturing as if theatrics could rewrite reality. But every word he uttered only revealed more cracks in his carefully constructed facade. He began pointing fingers, attempting to blame me, painting me as unreasonable, overreacting, emotionally unstable. Friends and family watched silently, confusion turning into disbelief as they scanned the evidence laid out before them. Every screenshot, every bank statement, every carefully documented lie countered his narrative. The room's energy shifted. His confidence faltered, it morphed into visible desperation. In his haste, he made mistakes. He revealed hidden communications, old texts meant to stay private, financial discrepancies he thought no one would notice. Every attempt to reclaim control backfired. He was no longer the puppet master, he was the puppet, tangled in his own threads. Each lie he tried to spin, each excuse he offered, only strengthened the undeniable truth: he had betrayed trust, manipulated love, and squandered the bond we shared. I remained composed. Calm. Measured. My silence became a weapon more piercing than any accusation. Witnesses who had once been unsure now began to piece together the timeline, the repeated betrayals, the pattern he had thought hidden. His final overreach came when he tried to sway a mutual friend, waving documents in a desperate attempt to shift blame. But it was too late. The evidence had already spoken, unassailable and precise. Tyler's face, once full of smug certainty, now betrayed the reality he could no longer control. He had pushed too far, revealed too much, and now the reversal was inevitable. The room, once his domain, was no longer safe for lies. The power had fully shifted. He had overreached, and I had been ready. The truth landed like a hammer. I let the documented evidence speak for itself: screenshots, transaction records, messages, timelines, all precise, undeniable, and irrefutable. Minimal words from me, just quiet authority. Each fact dismantled his web of deceit. Every observer saw the pattern he thought hidden: betrayal, manipulation, and misuse of trust. Tyler tried to interrupt, to justify, to charm, but the narrative was no longer his. His voice faltered under scrutiny. Witnesses leaned forward, absorbing the revelations with a mix of shock and disbelief. Friends, family, colleagues, they all began connecting the dots he had assumed were invisible. The messages from the wedding day, the anniversary, the repeated lies about work trips and emergencies, every act of betrayal now visible, crystal clear. The hidden account, the diverted funds, the luxury purchases, all of it exposed. Each piece added weight, crushing his claims of innocence. I stood there, composed, dominant, untouchable. Not a shout, not a scream, just calm precision. My silence amplified the evidence, making every fact resonate louder. Tyler's attempt to reclaim dignity failed. Each defense crumbled under the weight of documented truth. The audience, my family, friends, mutual acquaintances, witnessed the collapse of the man they once admired. His carefully constructed persona fell apart, not by my fury, but by the patience, strategy, and diligence I had cultivated over months. Every act of deception he had counted on to remain secret had been catalogued, timed, and presented at the perfect moment. And then, the moment everyone had been waiting for, the final revelation, my hidden leverage. The proof that not only had he betrayed me emotionally, but he had also misappropriated marital funds, leaving him exposed legally and socially. Gasps, whispers, and stunned silence filled the room. Tyler's arrogance, the shield he had relied on, shattered before their eyes. In that moment, I didn't need to speak. My victory wasn't loud, it was complete, irreversible, and public. The power had fully shifted. The audience understood what he had done, and I was free from his manipulation. The weight of justice, precise and undeniable, hung in the air. Tyler's downfall was now a public fact, and I had orchestrated it without losing my composure, without stooping to malice, only through strategy, evidence, and timing. Tyler's world unraveled in real time. Friends, family, colleagues, everyone saw the evidence, the messages, the financial misdeeds, and the lies. His confident posture crumbled as murmurs spread across the room. Every smile he had worn to charm others faded into disbelief and shame. People who once admired him now questioned every interaction. The same social circles that had praised him for years now exchanged knowing glances, silently marking the distance. Tyler tried to speak, to regain control, but the room had shifted, his influence dissolved. The proof was irrefutable: hidden accounts, diverted funds, repeated betrayals, and the pattern of deception. There was no excuse, no plausible story, no charm that could repair the damage. He was exposed, publicly, in the same spaces he had once dominated. Even casual acquaintances who had trusted him in passing now turned away. The whispers of shock, anger, and judgment filled the air. Every witness to his facade crumbling felt a mix of awe and disbelief. I stood at the center, calm, untouchable, observing the fallout. My silence amplified his exposure. I didn't need to shout, beg, or justify. The facts had done their work. By the time the last glance fell on me, the room understood the full scope of his deceit. The collapse wasn't theatrical, it was complete, undeniable, and permanent. Tyler had lost not just his credibility, but his social standing, his carefully built image, and the control he had always wielded. In the quiet aftermath, I walked away. Not in anger, not in triumphalism, but with the certainty that justice had finally manifested publicly. Every lie, every betrayal, every attempt to manipulate, had been catalogued, revealed, and neutralized. The audience didn't just witness his collapse, they felt it, a visceral rush of satisfaction as truth overtook deception. Just when everyone thought the story had ended, the final twist surfaced. Hidden documents, meticulously kept receipts, and a timeline of his manipulations were shared with key family members and mutual friends. Tyler's arrogance had blinded him. He never imagined that the woman he betrayed was quietly building an airtight case. The revelation was complete. Every financial diversion, every secret meeting, every manipulated moment was exposed. Tyler's previous allies gasped, his family reeled, and his social network reevaluated every memory they had trusted. He had assumed secrecy would shield him, but in reality, it magnified his downfall. I stood empowered, untouchable. The silence I had maintained through years of subtle suffering now became my loudest statement. There was no malice, no shouting, just undeniable truth. The audience could feel the shock, the dopamine rush of witnessing complete reversal, as justice was served not through rage but through intellect, restraint, and strategy. The final shock wasn't just his exposure, it was the realization that the life he controlled had slipped from his grasp. Every hidden advantage he thought he had was turned against him. I had used patience, observation, and careful documentation to ensure that when the moment came, his collapse would be total, irreversible, and spectacular. In that instant, it became clear: real power isn't loud. It's calculated, unstoppable, and leaves the wrongdoer powerless while the one wronged rises above with dignity intact.